Good evening. I'm Melissa Samuels, Director of Alumni Programs for the Albany Alumni Association. Very happy to welcome you to our program tonight, Leading and Excelling as a Young Professional. We have a great group representing, I think, a variety of industries and backgrounds, and I'm really looking forward to some interesting conversations. So let me just briefly introduce everyone. Joining us tonight is Jennifer DeMatteis. Jennifer is Vice President of Healthcare Communications, CGI Health, or GCI Health. We have Lisa Fun, class of 05, who's Senior Vice President for Goldman Sachs. We have two Chris's with us tonight. We have Chris Honora, class of 11. Chris is a Senior Product Manager at Intap. And then Chris Wyatt, 05, who is a Partnership Manager with Alto Pharmacy. And tonight we're also fortunate to have Gina Valentino, class of 14, moderating for us. Gina is the editor of Westchester Home and associate editor of Westchester Magazine 914 Inc. Gina is also the chair of the Gold Committee, and tonight's program, as you know, is being brought to you by Gold graduates of the last decade. So Gina, why don't we get started?
Thank you, Melissa. Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm looking forward to our discussion. We have questions for each of the individual panelists, but let's start with a lightning round to all of the panelists. Anyone can answer. What does being a leader in the workplace mean to each of you?
I think it's
go ahead, Jen.
Jennifer, do you want to start?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I was just saying, I think it's a very big responsibility to the people who report to you and also to your customers of your business, whether it's a retail company, a hospital, a school. You're responsible to a lot of people, and that's the biggest aspect of leadership, to my perspective.
Completely agree, but I think also being a good leader and being a manager is very different. I think characteristics of a leader are, focused on empathy and integrity, accountability, and trust. Whereas managing, you're sort of, focused on sort of the day-to-day execution and ensuring that your team members are actually delivering. So I think it's also important to differentiate between being a good manager versus being a good leader, because I think sometimes we also think of them as like one and the same, but I think, in my opinion, they're a little bit different.
I agree with you, Lisa. I think as part of the empathy component, just having a relatability factor and knowing your audience, knowing who you're talking to, and also being able to talk to different people in different ways, not treating everyone or treating everything exactly the same, because everyone is different, everyone is unique. And if you acknowledge that, I think that goes a long way with your peers and other people that you are interacting with.
Chime in there as well. I couldn't agree more with Chris, Lisa, Jennifer. Relatability, in my opinion, is key. The ability to meet people at their level, whether they're more mature than you are or less experienced than you are, and the ability to inspire others is also really, really a key intangible, I would say, that not everyone has. So the ability to cultivate that is really important.
Thank you, everyone. For our individual questions, we'll start with Jennifer. Jennifer, professionally, your focus has been on executive, employee, and workplace communications. What communication skills do you deem imperative for young leaders, and how can one work on those skills if one doesn't have them already?
Thanks for the question. So the two main skills that come to mind, I think everybody has but can always work on, and that's writing skills and presentation skills. With the rise of social media and the internet, we've seen writing skills change, both at executives at my level to those that are entry level. It's just made us very dependent on technology. The writing has gotten shorter, it's gotten more casual, but a lot more is required in the workplace for a lot of different forums. And it can never be underestimated how important writing is, from a basic email to your manager about an assignment you're turning in, to something more formal like a speech. And depending on the field you're in, those variables vary, but you're always communicating, as we all know, in this virtual nature, especially in email. And sometimes something that simple can be really flawed. And the public speaking and presentation skills as well, especially in this virtual environment, we're all in presentation mode in some way, constantly on Zoom and on Teams like this meeting, but also your day-to-day interactions have turned into a presentation, every hour of the day. And that ability to engage people, to keep them informed about the points that you're trying to make, and to get everybody on the same page by the end of your discussion points is really an important skill to have, and it never leaves. It's always important. So I would say those two are crucial, and they both are signals to the type of employee and peer that you are. So you're represented by your writing and the way that you carry yourself. So they're very important skills to have.
Jen, I just wanted to chime in there. I couldn't agree more, Jennifer. I think you're 100% right. And I just couldn't help but reflect that back on my time at Albany and some of the different leadership opportunities that maybe many of us had, whether it was like an e-board or Res Life. And, I just want to encourage everyone that mindset continues, even as you enter into the workplace and different extracurriculars, all of that, getting yourself out of your comfort zone. To Jennifer's point, I think it's super, super imperative.
I agree with both of you. I think in regards to having a mindset that is positive and forward thinking and just being aware of what's going on, I think it goes really well, but also that type of energy is very contagious with other individuals. So if you're negative or a downer, I think that resonates with a lot of people and comes off a certain way. It's easy to see. But when you're positive and you have energy, a lot of people like that. A lot of people vibe with that. A lot of people rock with that. And so me personally, I try to come across that way. That's how I try to interact with family, friends, colleagues. But I just think in general of having a positive mindset and knowing what your mind is and how it impacts others and just being cognizant of it.
And it's contagious, I think. If you put off the positive vibe, you get that back, and it creates like a positive vibe, whether it's in an office, in a meeting, amongst the team. So it's another benefit as well.
Yeah, I think people, especially now with COVID, people are realizing how maybe they weren't having as much fun pre-COVID. Now they are, with a lot of roles being remote. So just the aspect of work now being maybe more fun than it has been in the past is sort of something that a lot more people are aware of, especially when people have positive energy and positive vibes. I think it goes really far and goes a long way.
Well, thank you everyone for your input on that. Lisa, my next question is, young professionals often do not have extensive experience in the workplace. This can hinder their confidence, and they can experience what's known as imposter syndrome. You began working with Goldman Sachs right out of college and have now been with the company for more than 16 years. Did you experience those feelings when you began your tenure there as a recent graduate? And if so, what helped you grow and move past that to improve your confidence?
Yeah, so like you mentioned, I joined Goldman right from school, and I was a mathematics major with an education and very little business minor. I think I took like the bare minimum of the business classes to complete the minor. So I had absolutely no finance background, or really, to be honest, any market interest, and probably still don't tell anybody that. But I definitely felt intimidated at the start in terms of, how am I ever going to do this? I have no idea, like, how the stock market works, when it opens, when it closes, et cetera. But I think the nice thing about working at the firm is that you come in very similar to coming in as like a freshman class at Albany. You come in as an analyst class of whatever year that you're starting at the firm. So you really create very much organically a really nice support basis, and a really great network to leverage, to ask questions, to make sure that you're sort of on the right track, et cetera. So I think that definitely helps make this large company that I work for, seem a little bit smaller. And I think going in, I sort of took the approach that I would learn, I would try to keep a smile on my face to, the earlier points, and just ask questions and take a ton of notes. To share a totally embarrassing story, back in, '05 when I started, we still printed a lot of paper. And I work in operations. We work on post-trade issues and do a lot of problem solving. So we had an issue with a security called International Business Machines. For those of you that are probably listening, you probably know that this is IBM. But for me, not knowing anything about finance, I think this was like day maybe 7, I decided that I was going to screen this, like, what kind of security is this? And people were like, basically, you're an idiot, sit down and fix the problem. So clearly I sort of learned my boundaries of understanding what the right things to do or to question were very early on. Like, don't question the need for security, just figure out what the root cause is and move on. But I think, having that aspect of just doing things with a smile, it might not be the best glamorous thing ever. But I think I built a reputation over time that I had resilience. I would get involved in any way or any shape, form of anything that I could. And I would ask questions. Hopefully they were much smarter than what IBM stands for. That way I had a little bit of confidence incrementally to make sure that I was either progressing, doing the right things at the right time. And if and where I was veering off track, I knew that I had either my managers, my mentors, and really my support system to be like, yep, you're doing well, keep going, keep the wheels in motion. I think my first few years, I probably said like, hey, I'm not a finance major, probably a little bit too much. But I think that was my way of also compensating to let said individual know that like, hey, I might be a little bit slower, but I'm going to try and get this done for you and, give it 100% plus of my, devoted attention. So a couple lessons learned there, but I think, the firm does a really nice job. And I think that's probably a bit unique from, the finance world of bringing in people as a class, as a group, so we can all leverage each other to hopefully have, successful careers.
Does anyone have any thoughts on their own experiences when they first started out?
100%. I can chime in on Lisa as well. She started at Goldman. I started at Barclays. So we were both in the financial services area, and I could attest to everything she just mentioned. I felt the same way. And let me be frank and honest, I had a little bit of a complex in multiple capacities, because I remember my analyst class, like Lisa just mentioned, there's an analyst class. Everyone says, tell me your school. Everyone went to this target school or that target school. And I love you, Albany, but it wasn't necessarily a target school of my firm. And, for me, I think that put a little bit more of a chip on my shoulder just to prove everyone what a great product that this university produces. So that's something that I really leaned on as well. So I could totally relate, Lisa, to what you mentioned.
And then
My
Lisa,
experience-
go ahead, Jennifer.
My experience was the opposite of Lisa and Chris, that I started at a very small public relations firm, and the total employee base was maybe 7 people. So I had a big, I didn't have like an entry class like Lisa was describing, and I really had a big age gap between myself and the next executive in the hierarchy, so to speak. So I was really on my own a lot, trying to navigate it and have, you have that imposter syndrome. You don't want to ask questions if you feel like you might be perceived a certain way, like you should know this, why are you asking this question? So it took me a while to navigate and understand where and when I should push and pull on certain things. And I think observation mode is what I tell a lot of people that I mentor or those that I manage. I think being in observation mode is a really good skill to get a sense of the norms in your workplace, and they change, depending on how many jobs you have. There's different etiquette and different ways that people interact, and it's really good to kind of just observe a little bit and see who you're dealing with, and that helps you know where you can play, where you can ask questions, who you can approach, and where you should go off and maybe figure a few things out on your own before you start digging into areas and asking questions more.
And then for your points, Lisa, earlier in regards to starting out and being kind of embarrassed, I think when you start off situations like that and you don't necessarily have maybe success immediately, it helps you to learn and to basically to grow and to tighten your game up and figure out ways you can improve or what areas you can work on, because that could have been a question that you asked 5 years into your career, but you asked early on, and by learning that one thing that you went through, it helps learn and hone other skills. But I think just in general, when you start out and you stumble per se, you learn a lot of skills, you learn a lot of ways to navigate, and when things are not necessarily easy or come smoothly, you figure ways to navigate and sort of move forward and past.
I agree.
Thank you. So Chris and Nora, this question is for you. You were highly involved while you were on campus. You were a Purple and Gold ambassador, a member of multiple honor societies, and the commencement speaker. Did you always feel that you were a leader innately? And if so, what did you do to nurture that natural ability to lead? And if not, how did you encourage yourself out of that comfort zone to take on leadership positions?
Gina, you almost made me blush there. I get nervous when people talk about resumes and accolades. That's not my style. But and this might come across the wrong way, but I was that kid in high school where you probably didn't like being in class with me because I was really confident. I answered every single question and I made you know that I knew the answer. So yes, I was very confident that I was a leader. Sometimes too confident, but what I would say is that, like, when I first came to Albany as a freshman, you hear the saying, you know, I want the world and everything that's in it. That's literally like what was in my mind when I came to Albany. I was like, I want to milk this school and do everything I can possibly do here. So in terms of nurturing those leadership skills, I tried to do so many things: residential life, e-boards of organizations, peer mentoring. And, you know, what I found is that the more I tried and the more I did, the more doors opened up, because there's something called exposure. Like, and this carries through in the workplace as well. I think a lot of folks on this panel could relate to that, is that the more initiative that you take and the more steps you take forward, the more people notice you, the more people, you know, give you more opportunities. And, you know, one thing led to another. I became a Purple and Gold ambassador, so on and so forth. And the rest is history. So my advice for, I guess, anyone listening into this, whether you're an undergrad or whether you're a young professional, is, you know, try to take initiative to put yourself in positions where you can display those leadership skills and hone them, right? Because no one's perfect, right? As much as confident as you may be, or as confident as I was far from perfect. So I think that's the little I have to say on that.
I couldn't agree more on the networking piece. I think, you know, one of the things that I don't think I appreciated probably as a student at UAlbany, and probably until my senior year, was just the value of having a network and what that network can help you with. And I think, you know, if you learn that, I'll call it younger in your career, the more successful you are going to be, whether it's getting opportunities in your current job, moving to a different role, moving to a different company. You know, I think, Chris, you said it spot on. Like, the more people and the more initiatives that you're involved in, and of course, do it well and do it passionately, the more doors and opportunities will open up for you.
I'm a big believer in the fact of, you never know who you're going to cross paths with, let alone what doors or opportunities will be open. Because you might meet someone in a networking event today, 2 years from now, they have an opportunity that could change your life. Or you've been someone you had met at a meeting three months ago, introduced you to someone that has an opening on their team that needs someone of your background and your skill set. It's like, there's so many unknowns that you can't necessarily prepare for or hope for. But I think just in generally, if you surround yourself with a support system of, individuals from a networking standpoint that can connect the dots or put you in a position or make an introduction, I think that you can exponentially expand your opportunities for next steps and moves and things that you might not imagine or think of in so many ways, whether it happens in a month, a year, or a decade from now. Just in general, the possibilities for having a strong network, I think, can be unlimited.
Chris Wyatt, you formerly were a basketball player at the university. Can you share any leadership tips that you learned as a college athlete that transcended the court to your professional career that might be helpful for young professionals?
Absolutely. I would say ups and downs, as in a lot of sports, you win, you lose, you get hurt. You know, it's not always easy. One of the things that, from a leadership perspective, I would say that's transferred over in regards to whether I'm in a situation where I'm doing well or not, just being confident in myself, staying in the positive mindset, and just continually be forward looking. So when things come up, challenges, difficulties, or whatever they might be, putting things together to sort of figure them out and move forward. I know from a networking standpoint, or just off the principle of surrounding yourselves with people that are supportive of you. So in basketball and college, having strong friends or teammates or administrators at the university, professors I confided in, and just transferring that into the real world as far as the working space. So if you have someone that's a colleague, counterpart, that is supportive of your career, that really wants to see you grow, if you can outline or identify with a mentor, someone that really wants to help you out, not just for now, but also for the future, and isn't necessarily trying to use you for your skills, but they're genuinely interested in you developing and growing. I think if you are focused on hanging around those type of people that can connect the dots and really help you and support you, you can do well. Also, one of the other things I would just say from a leadership perspective, I said this before and I'll say it again, but relatability factor, whether you're talking to the strongest employee or the weakest link or the strongest person in a certain department, treating everyone with respect, having empathy for other individuals. I think that comes across as just an individual that keeps it real. But I think you can rub certain people certain ways, and if someone feels disrespected or you are rude to them just because of their title or you don't know who that person is, I think that is not a good example of a leader, someone that sort of steps in, is willing to help anyone if they're able to. But for the most part, just having empathy and treating people with respect and having a positive mindset.
I feel like also part of it is like grabbing onto those characteristics of those individuals that like you're watching, or you're like, you know what, I really like the way, you know, how he articulated X, Y, and Z, or I really like the way that this person has done this, right? I feel like I also do a lot of that in the workplace of looking at the two extremes of like, oh, wow, that person handled this situation really, really well. I'm going to remember this so that when I'm in this situation, hopefully I can emulate that. But then also on the flip side, being like, okay, we're in a crappy situation right now. This person is definitely not handling things well. Like also keeping that also on the other side of your brain a little bit to remember to be like, okay, if I'm ever in this situation, like I know I need to like keep my composure, or, you know, whatever the situation is. I feel like I also do a lot of that, like taking, I don't want to call it the good out of people, but sort of the good out of people and like emulating them. And then of course, like hopefully creating a relationship with that person because you want to get to know them and understand how like their mind acts to be able to be that, you know, that best person, that best leader that you want to be.
I think also to the fact of when you're younger and you have people that are your mentors or trying to help you out, and then as you get older, you get more experience. I've just noticed that as so many people have opened up doors for me and helped me in certain situations and connected me, I am doing what they did for me. So whether it's my first job or an introduction or a meeting, it's like, I remember when I didn't know people, I had I didn't have much experience, and it's like, I don't sometimes have the answer, but there are people that are willing to coach me and mentor me. And now that I'm in a situation where I have a lot of more experience than what I did in the past, being able just really trying to give back and really move the whole like society forward, just the general being able to help others, because so many doors were open for me because people were willing to just go out of their way and be mentors or a great leader. And I wouldn't be where I am today. And because of that, I try to do the same thing for people, whether I know them or not.
Exactly.
Lisa, you are a part of the executive committee for the UAlbany Alumni Association Board of Directors. As part of the committee, you interact with many young students and alumni. What characteristics would you say set apart those alumni who would be considered leaders?
Yeah, I think, what sets good alumni apart from, or really anyone apart for that matter, I think is all in like the delivery and prep of what you're going to talk to that individual about. I don't think that you need to be 100% polished in your sort of delivery and conversation with that person, but take a few minutes and like gather your thoughts, jot down some questions to ask just to be prepared. I feel like with the name of Goldman Sachs, I feel like I talk to a lot of alumni and a lot of just random people because I hear the good brand of a name that we hopefully still have. But I think, if they haven't done the research or even, come prepared on what it is that they're looking for, often it is, obviously a job or an internship. I sort of know that they're not that serious. But you also want to be yourself and just be real and have, like I think the common thematic of what a lot of us are talking about is like having a positive attitude. We all carry the Great Dane brand with us every single day, if we like it or not. And I think that Great Dane brand is becoming even more strong as the years progress. Obviously, like the caliber of students that you all are right now are much higher than probably when any of us were students at that time. And I think that, the university is definitely creating a much, I don't want to call it better, but I'll use that terminology just to use it right now. A much better brand that is much more recognized in a variety of different fields, whether it be research, whether it be finance, whether it be, communications or government, etc. Just remember who you are, and people will remember that university that you went to when you talk to them. So take the time, take the effort, and just think about what you're going to talk to somebody about, to show that you're prepared and you're willing, and hopefully you're doing it with a smile on your face.
Hey, Lisa, to that point, would you say you have any examples of when you started out with the IBM example, anything that you've seen from younger folks that have maybe made mistakes or said something publicly that they probably shouldn't have?
Yeah, I think that, I do a lot of coaching with our alumni, and I'm sure I've probably talked to many of you on the webinar today. And I can't emphasize enough around, I know it's hard to sort of portray your emotions on a call, or obviously if it's over Zoom, you can sort of see the smile on somebody's face and somebody's emotions. But if you can't see them, like talk with some excitement. Like I will usually go out on a whim and say like, okay, you're a hard worker. I know that, the University of Albany student is always going to be that hard worker, but to get you that first round interview and put, whether it's my name on the line or somebody else's name on the line, to then give you that opportunity and have that opportunity just be like very blah and dull, and sort of you answer the questions and like you don't have a conversation with somebody, like you don't really want to talk to somebody that's talking to you like this all the time. Like, play it up a little bit. Like if you need to go for a walk or do a little bit of prep of like self-confidence or like whatever it is, but just be excited. I think that, having an opportunity to meet with individuals that work for institutions that carry a big name is not always very common, right? So take the opportunity, do the research, show the excitement, and who knows, it will get you, where it will lead to.
Especially if there's two people and one is showing that they're engaged, there's good energy, and they did their homework, versus someone with very similar background but is not showing those signals or signs. I think it's really easy to see where to go or who's going to move forward and who's not.
Exactly.
And Lisa made a really good point about that connection is not available to everybody. And I think it's really important to make the most out of that conversation, whether it's a half hour or an hour. And also remember that I don't want to say this person's doing you a favor, but in a way they are, because it is a gateway into an institution or their network. And I've had conversations sometimes where, it felt like the onus was on me to sell the company, or like, what jobs do you have there? And it really should be the other way around, of talking about yourself and what you're interested in. You've looked into the company, you've seen this and that. That's why you're interested. Here are some areas I would love to hear more about if you have any insight for me, and really make the conversation meaningful and have some substance, but driving it yourself and not depending on the person that's in the workplace to be just handing you out information.
Jennifer, I wanted to chime in there. I couldn't agree more that even with interviews, as you become more experienced in your career, I try to treat everything as a conversation. It's a two-way street. I think sometimes there's a tendency, especially coming out of undergrad or maybe earlier in your career, it's like, okay, someone's going to ask me a firing squad of questions. And it isn't like that, but I found what has helped make me successful in different realms has been to show genuine interest in the person you're speaking to. At all times. It could be an analyst or someone that's very early in their career. It could be a managing director or someone super senior, but show genuine interest in what people do, be inquisitive, ask questions. And if you are interested, it will be exactly, I think, like Lisa just mentioned, you would have done the research, right? Because you're interested. So I think if you're genuinely interested, don't view things as an interview or because you'll get nervous. You're getting to know someone, and I think that will go a long way.
They're all great insights. Thank you so much. Chris and Nora, in college, you studied abroad in Cape Town, where you volunteered with a nonprofit organization. You mentioned at the time that your view of the world had changed after seeing how people in another part of the world live. How important do you think that learning about others' cultures can impact one's leadership skills?
Oh, super important. I think everyone that goes to Albany benefits, right, by going to school in New York, right? I mean, the capital district, you have New York City not too far, it's the melting pot of the world, one of the most diverse parts of the world. Like, exposure is paramount. And for me, just personally speaking, I'm first generation, my family is Nigerian, so I always had that perspective. But sometimes we get in our, if you want to call it Northeast bubble, USA bubble, and the world is very much a big place. We're on Zoom right now, and I'm sure, Lisa, you would agree with this. Everyone here would agree with this. You have worked for a global firm. The world is so flat because of this, and it's much bigger than your world. So I think it's super, super important to get exposure. And that's one of the things I wanted to do at UAlbany. True confession, I didn't want to take a whole semester because I was so involved. I didn't want to miss a lot. So I snuck in an early summer session. So that's how, I did a month in South Africa. That's how I was able to make it happen. But super important, totally. And last thing, we talk about study abroad, but early in your career, depending on the firm you work for, sometimes there may be international opportunities. And I have had plenty of friends before they start families and whatnot. They want to go to London, they want to go to Hong Kong. The study abroad train doesn't end with graduation. So think broadly.
Chris,
I agree with you,
I was
Chris.
going to say, you've been to more than 30 countries yourself. Do you want to chime in here?
I would say, so to your traveling to Cape Town, I myself actively like to travel abroad. I remember after I graduated from college, my teammate played basketball in Europe. He played in Belgium, and I went for the first time to Europe, and I was it basically opened up my eyes to a different way of life. The food, the culture, the people, the buildings. I'm like, they don't have castles in the United States. This is crazy. So but also, I was never really around someone that was born in China that speaks Italian, but we're also in a French speaking country, Belgium. It's like, okay, well, wait, so you're from a different continent, you speak 8 languages, and where do they do this? So being able to just see that there are different ways of life, different cultures from like the USA bubble that we live in, and just being able to meet different types of people and learn all sorts of history and culture and how what we know in the US is specific to the US. And I think the perspective growing up, it's US is the best. We have everything we need. But when you leave the US, it's like, wow, it's incredible to see what is out there. So I've been to Asia, I've been to Africa, I've been to Europe, I've been to South America, and then pre-COVID, I've been to Europe 21 times. So I'm a big traveler when I can go, but I just love learning about cultures, people. And I think it goes back to the relatability factor with being a leader, with knowing your audience and being able to understand, okay, just because someone is from a place I've never been to and speaks a language I don't, doesn't mean you can't get along or connect or communicate.
I'll add to that. I think that completely agree with what both of you are saying, but I also think it's true within the United States. I think Chris touched on this earlier, where with that kind of like tri-state area, New York metro area mindset, there can be like an elite mindset about compared to the rest of the country. And I think having that open mind with other Americans is really important, because if you do work for a big firm, you're going to have offices in states around the country. So you not only have to have that cultural lens, ex-US, but also people work really differently just within the United States. You're going to have colleagues all over the country, and everybody has a different philosophy about work, a different work style, and then also just their approach to work is different, and their life outside of work, which always comes into work anyway. So I think it's also just to keep that open mind within the United States too.
That's true, Jennifer. And last piece, Jennifer, while you're speaking, something just came to my mind. And travel is an excellent conversation starter. Like, I'm just thinking someone like Chris W., like you've been to like, I don't know, X amount of countries. It must not be difficult starting a conversation at all, right? I would implore everyone, try, fresh directs, try different cuisine, try different countries. And, the more well-rounded you are, you can just relate to people so much easier.
Yeah, and then Jennifer, just like the fact of you just saying being open-minded, I think you either are or you aren't. And if you aren't, I think that sort of eliminates, or you see how people stand.
Absolutely.
Great. I have one more question for Chris Wyatt. And then in the meantime, everyone can put their questions, any questions that they have, in the Q&A section. Chris, you worked more than a decade at a biotechnology company and grew within the company, having assumed 5 different roles over the years. What is your advice for those looking to climb the ladder within their organization?
I would say one of the important things is to sort of know what your goals are, what's important to you. And I know just in general with society and what people think in social media, success is a relative term. So sometimes I think what you see on TV and on Facebook and Instagram is like money and cars, and people associate that with success. Me in particular, success for me is doing something that I have a goal and achieving that goal. And those goals are what I particularly set for myself. So navigating the corporate space can be tough. If you have a sponsor, if you have a mentor, I just recommend aligning with those individuals that are trying to support you or help you grow, or willing to sort of give you some advice on what you can do for your next move, and just stay driven, stay competitive, knowing that, okay, if there's a job opening and you're going for it, so are 10 other people. What's going to make you different? What's going to make you unique? What's the X factor? How you can differentiate yourself from all the individuals? But just in the principle of going from position A to position B, figuring out, okay, well, if I want to get to be a senior manager, what's needed to get there, and sort of aligning up with my background and doing particular things that fit with the responsibilities or the roles or the competencies of the next move or the next step. But don't give up, because realistically, when you don't get that interview, it's like, okay, did you fail? I don't think the mindset necessarily is to fail, but it's like you can learn from that, because I've interviewed and had multiple jobs that I really wanted and they didn't happen, but the interview practice has allowed me to step my game up to be tighter, tighter, tighter. And so when new opportunities come up, I'm able to be more of a stronger interview than I was in the past. And I continually get prepared for things.
Completely agree. And I think for those, that potentially don't have a feedback process in the companies that you're working for, like ask the question, right? Like what are my measures of success? How am I going to be in, above average or overachiever in this organization, right? And then make sure that you're aligning your manager's goals with your goals and put in those checkpoints, whether it's quarterly, monthly, more frequent, like work it out with your manager to make sure that you all agree on what it is that you're going to do by when and how you're going to track your progress. Because I think that's also part of making sure that you are successful, that you're achieving your goals. And if you achieve goals, obviously the reward, whether it's monetary or title, will obviously also come. But don't be afraid to ask the question.
Yeah, Lisa, to your point,
you all need like a goal, right? And a milestone to keep everybody motivated and happy, especially in this environment that we're all unfortunately still living in. Sorry, Chris.
No, I agree. I think also if you have a mentor or a coach that can sort of help accelerate your next move, or just having other people in your circle to support your growth helps you more than maybe by yourself. Because if you have two opportunities that you want, but your network has 20, the odds are in the favor of leaning towards the group of people that are willing to help and support your growth.
Great. Well, thank you so much. We have some great questions in the chat right now in the Q&A section. One of them is, how do you maintain an upbeat, positive energy in a work environment that can give off more negative vibes and be a stressful environment? Jennifer, in the past, you had created colleague engagement campaigns to build morale within a company. Do you have any advice for this question?
I do. I think that we've talked about being curious and continuing to be a student a few times in this session. And I think that's a great motivator, particularly when you're feeling negative or stressful vibes, is to find some cursory projects, other mentors, kind of expanding your network, everything that we've been talking about, because sometimes when you feel that stressor and that negativity, you start to feel like you're in a hole and like there's no way out. But to get control of that situation is to find additional things to widen that like tunnel vision. And with that is like new learning experiences, new projects that open you to new people that will in turn get you the exposure that might get you out of the role that maybe is making you feel negative, or the boss that's making you feel negative. So I think that keeping an open eye, sometimes it's hard to find the energy, I won't lie, because sometimes you're taking on extracurricular projects or activities when you already feel a little depleted because things are going a little sour. But that's when you really have to muster the strength and take on some other things so that you can expand your network, learn something new, get exposure to different people. So I think that's a really great thing to keep in mind when things go that way. And then just generally, like when the culture or the environment is negative, we're still in the midst of kind of a really tough time. It's just find people you can talk to, your colleagues, your mentors. Some companies that are larger have confidential HR type of departments that you can talk to if you're struggling with a particular thing. Take advantage of those avenues as well, because those are great coping avenues for you.
Also want to chime in briefly. I know we're limited on time, but I agree, Jennifer, what you just mentioned, because I had an experience like that. But to whoever put that question in, just to encourage you that, I don't know, you have to taste, sometimes you have to taste bad soup to know what good soup tastes like, so, try to embrace it, especially once you're through it. I won't say it because I've been through it. I know it's that's not really what you want to hear, but after the fact, I think that'll be an experience in your collection that you'll always be able to refer to know what good looks like or what not so good looks like.
Who can answer what is the best advice you received when you first started in the workplace as a young professional? Great question.
I think it was probably to stay positive and ask a lot of questions.
Especially
when it gets tough, take a walk and then come back sort of refreshed, or do what you need to do to regain your composure, and then come back and be ready to start over or start again.
Especially not being shy to ask questions, because if you don't know, you're not going to know unless you do something about it, most likely. And it's very hard, especially if you're young. It might be embarrassing to not know something, but are you going to continue to not know, or are you going to figure it out? And sometimes if you just ask a question, some people might say it's dumb, but that allows you to learn somehow, some way. And then, okay, next time you go around, you have another skill set of this library of experiences and memories that you can draw from and use to your figuring out your next challenge or your difficult situation to be in.
One thing I was going to say about career advice, it's writing specific because of my field, but I had my first boss said to me, never fall in love with a sentence. And what she meant by that is, if you're writing something and you really love this one line that you put in there, when you have to go and edit it, you avoid fixing that sentence because you love it so much, you think it's so great. And over the years, I've extrapolated that just in the terms of working, that your ideas aren't the only ones at the table. You have to learn to compromise. You have to be open-minded to what others are bringing to the table or how something can be better. It's not only about your piece of the work. So I've continued to reflect on that, even though at the time it was very specific, but I always come back to that piece of advice.
Also, one thing, Gina, I know that there's been, when I started out and sometimes just generally getting advice, some people tell you what you should do instead of asking you what you're interested in doing. So if someone's telling me, well, you need to do this, you need to do that, and I am not interested in doing any of that to start. So why would I do something that you're telling me to do? And I think a lot of times people that are in those situations of telling someone what they should do before they even ask them what they're interested in and whatnot, it's what they think that if they were in that situation, that's what they would do. Sometimes with parents or people in your family, your uncle, your aunt, it's oh, your mom said, well, you need to be doing this. And it's well, did you even ask me what I'm interested in? So I think just being aware of those people that are in your circle that are trying to mentor you, trying to really support you, of just figuring out, okay, do they know what's important to me? Do they know what I want? Or are they telling me what they think I should do because they would do this if they were my age or in my situation?
I think that's also a really good point, because 9 times out of 10, if you're passionate about something, you're going to do it well, right? Obviously you can't always get the shiny, bright projects, right? You're going to have to do things that you don't potentially want to do. But my rule of thumb is always 80-20 rule, right? If 80% of the projects that I'm involved in are the things that I'm doing, I'm very happy doing, you're always going to have like the bottom stuff that needs to get done, just like your schoolwork, right? Like some of your classes aren't going to be the best, but you have to try and give it a little bit of effort versus those classes that you really enjoy and are your passion. You're most likely going to get a higher grade value on that one because you're super into it, right? So understanding what it is that you want to do and then articulating that to whoever that person is, completely agree, Chris. Like it will lead to a much better outcome. And I think that's also probably, to come full circle to the question of like what makes a good leader. I think it's also just understanding who your people are and what they're passionate about and what they want to get out of, whether it's the role that they're in or, they're just goals, their career goals, right? And making sure that as you're assigning work or assigning projects, you're playing to their strengths or their areas of development that they need to work on to get to their, ultimate goal.
Thank you. We have many questions about how to build a network as a young professional. How do you create a network as a young professional, how to do so as an introvert, and how to find your mentor?
I'm happy to start this one. Look, as I get the thing as an introvert, I think growth is uncomfortable. I think that's one thing to try to digest, that to grow and to stretch requires putting yourself in a position where you may not be the most comfortable. So one example I would give is, I don't know, roller coasters. I never used to like roller coasters, but we have Six Flags Great Adventure here in New York, right? New Jersey. So you just face your fear and you go there and it becomes easier. So I would, to make this a little bit more tangible, but if your firm has like affinity groups or something that you're super passionate about, whether you're part of a certain community, underrepresented community, or maybe there are certain common causes that employees rally around in the workplace that is not as maybe stressful as your day-to-day job, but something you're other than that you're passionate about, go. Strike up a conversation, talk to people. If you don't have to be in the leadership position, if they have a subcommittee, be on the subcommittee. So all the light's not on you, but you still have an opportunity to help move the needle forward. So the baby steps will help. And then the confidence, in my opinion, I think rises as time goes forward.
I'll speak from partly being an introvert. I think if you are expected to go to a networking event by yourself in a room full of people you don't know, that's going to probably give you a lot of stress or some anxiety. My recommendation would be keeping the perspective that if you don't do it, the next person is. So, all right, well, yeah, you don't have to go by yourself. Maybe you can go with a colleague, a partner, someone that you know that is open to going. Or is there someone that you really want to meet or make an introduction to, or someone that would be great to get on your radar? Maybe you can have a warm introduction from a friend or a colleague and go from there. I just think that there's, especially with LinkedIn and technology and online platforms, there's a lot of things, as we all are sitting in remote different places, we're not physically in one location. You can connect with people in your neighborhood, people in different countries and different continents through the computer. So I would recommend just basically using the internet as a tool of reaching out to people. You can send messages on LinkedIn. There's multiple ways through group chats and forums and personal introductions that you can meet a variety of different people as an introvert or if you're outgoing. But in particular, as an introvert, I would say use technology to your advantage to get out and use that grasp to basically get anywhere in the world or anyone you want to meet that's not physically in front of you.
I think just to add to that, like leverage the university's resources, whether it's like the UCAN campaigns, getting on, the career services sites, meeting with people in career services. I think that's also a great way just to get to know people. And just to talk to people. And you don't have to do it over Zoom. You can do it over the phone if you can't do it in person yet, right? I would strongly recommend just leveraging the power of the alumni association or the alumni base to help you develop, whether it's that networking skill set to say like, hey, how did you go about doing this? And I really love the buddy idea, Chris. It's like sort of think back to college when you were trying to get involved in different organizations, and you probably weren't going to go to that initial meeting by yourself, right? You're going to take your roommate, you're going to take whoever it was that, you sat in class with, was like, hey, let's check this out tonight. Use that same approach. I think that's awesome. I think it's a really good idea.
And earlier, Lisa was talking about when she saw somebody that exhibited positive traits, she would want to emulate it. I think those people that you work with are great to approach in a mentor capacity, especially if you're an introvert. If you're around someone like myself that's more extroverted, you can approach them and say, like, I really wish I could feel that comfortable talking in a room of people I've never met before, or X, Y, and Z. Can we like have a session or get some coffee, and you could tell me just a bit about some tips that you can think of for somebody like myself, or maybe it's something about a skill set at work that's financial or writing or what have you. You see those people around you that you're like, I wish I could strengthen my skill there, and I love the way that they do that. Those are great people to approach, and it doesn't have to be a long-term mentor commitment, like you're engaging in this long-term relationship. It could be, one or two conversations and you get a lot out of it, but then you might just establish a relationship from there, or it might just be a few sessions.
And one thing I'll keep in perspective is that everyone that's on this call has a variety of different background, very experienced, very successful in what they've been able to achieve. It's not easy. So if it was easy, everyone would do it. And it's more so, I think, to simplify it, you might want it, but are you willing to do what it takes? And a lot of people are not willing to do what it takes to get to like where Gina is, or do what Jennifer's accomplished, or like Goldman Sachs. Like, that's, wow, I would never, why did she get to, it's like, okay, Lisa, if you did that, I was like, I want to do that, but I might want to, but I'm not willing to do or go through what you did. And it's like, I just think that in general, to be in certain positions, for sure, it's not easy. And if it was, everyone could do it. But just acknowledging the fact that, hey, I'm either going to strap up and figure ways to make it happen, and it's going to be uncomfortable. But like Chris said, it's like, you got to be willing to grow.
It's kind of like the athlete metaphor you were talking to earlier as well. It's like, it takes practice. It takes a lot of commitment. It takes teamwork, a lot of legwork, and you just can't become an athlete overnight. You have to put the work in. Very similar. Or
when you lose, if you lose and then you just quit. That's what happens to a lot of people. They just quit because it's very hard. It's very difficult. It's very challenging, whether it's athletics or a variety of other things in life. If you lose or you get knocked down, a lot of people are very discouraged, or they figure something out. Or I've per se lost, failed per se, but those for me, they're wins, because this allows me to learn and to build other skill sets from initially what I wanted to do. It didn't happen. So it's like, all right, this is a hurdle. This is my perspective. How can I grow? How can I move forward?
Chris, you said something that's so profound to me, like, and just you played basketball. There was a quote I saw by Michael Jordan. They did the whole documentary thing like last year, 2 years ago, but he said something really interesting, like leadership has a price, right? And you got to be willing to pay the price. And a lot of the things that you're doing and that people are mentioning here about putting yourself out of your comfort zone, think of them as investments, right? Like you're investing into your 5 years from now self, right? So like, paying the price, going above and beyond the bare minimum to put yourself out there, it will only help the future you.
Thank you so much. So we have a couple of more questions. One of the ones that was submitted to us before the panel started is, how do you land a job with little experience? We've gotten some questions like that as well. What's the best way to get work experience in relevant fields, as it's difficult to get internships at top companies?
I wouldn't say there isn't like a sweet spot, right? I think your resume needs to be diverse and show who you are as an individual. I don't think that probably any company is looking for a very unique, narrow lens like person, right? we're all very focused on diversity, making sure that we're leveraging the power of the team. And there's no I in team, right? You have to have that diverse mindset to make things happen. So, one of the things that I always look for in a resume is, yes, somewhat of a high GPA, but have you been involved in extracurriculars? What's been your involvement in those extracurriculars? It's not just the line item that you've been part of, whatever honor society that it is, right? Did you show leadership in that capacity? And then actually having that conversation about what it is that you did, what you've learned from it, how you've overcome challenges, to everyone's point, like getting to whether it's a senior VP level or, just going from, I'll call it analyst to associate, that first level, that takes a lot of work and a lot of grit from everybody, right? And a lot of support from your own, board of directors or mentors and mentees. So I think making sure that you're diversifying your own resume and showing that you have the leadership characteristics, you are a team player, you're willing to work hard, you can overcome challenges, I think is, to me, probably more important than having a 4.0 GPA and have only worked in, one company or have only joined one club, right?
I would caution everyone too to not have too much brand obsession with, big name firms, big companies. I mentioned earlier that I started out at a small PR firm when I started my career. And I wanted the big names. I wanted to work at a big company. I wanted to be in Manhattan, but it just didn't work out that way. It was right after 9/11. The economy was really bumpy. I was temping at a corporation in my hometown for a while. And I ended up getting this job at this small firm, but it ended up being one of the best jobs of my career because I got so much experience. Because like I said, it was a staff of 7 people. I had exposure to so many responsibilities. I was dealing with clients myself. I really also was responsible for a lot of the office managerial responsibilities, which gave me like a really great work ethic, and it really helped me respect, the backbone of a business, a small business, but it really, you take that stuff with you. And I think it was a really great foundation for me. And I would just encourage that, because I know it's very easy to just really want like the big names when you're out of college or on your career pursuits, but you can learn so much and sometimes even more at a no-name place.
And your first job is not going to be your last job,
That's
right?
true.
Like, so remember that, right? And there's nothing wrong with that.
That's so true. Lisa, to your point, and even Jennifer as well, like the experiences that you acquire, they help you. I was really astounded because I went through the whole promotion cycle this year at JP Morgan Chase, and like Lisa, it's exactly what you just described about an undergrad, right? Like if everyone has a 4.0 GPA, or if everyone is delivering, that's great, but everyone cannot advance in their career. So the question then becomes, what can you do to differentiate yourself or to show leadership? So, just building that mindset and that culture of constantly doing more or things that you're passionate about outside of your day-to-day, it'll only help you climb, because as you become more senior, everyone's delivering, but it's just about that intangible, I guess, I don't know.
Great point, Chris. What do you do to differentiate yourself? I think that goes a long way with, why are you special? Why are you unique? There's 10 people that want the same thing, but Chris has shown that he is different. He's unique. He deserves the promotion. He's built himself up. However, a lot of your colleagues wanted to do the same thing. So I think it's just also maybe knowing your brand, what you're about, what you're interested in, and how you come across to people. But also, again, why would someone want you to be in that situation versus someone else? And why are you different? Why are you unique? That goes a long way.
Okay, we have time for about 1 or 2 more questions. How do you earn respect from the executive boards at jobs as a young professional? How do you earn respect from older colleagues?
I would say rolling up your sleeves. I think one of the lessons that I don't want to say learned quickly, but one of my first projects outside of the different functions that I was asked to do was to go into our mainframe. And yes, at the time we still had a mainframe, for those that know what a mainframe is, which is a really archaic system. And I literally had to go in and look at, I'm going to call it thousands, what felt like thousands of accounts, and determine the last time that account was used. There's a lot of copying and pasting from this mainframe platform into Excel. Why I didn't figure out a better way to do it is probably a good question. But I sort of did this. It took me forever to get it done, but I did it. I did it super manually. And then I was like, you know what? Instead of just sending my manager this list of all the accounts and the date, I'm going to put a graph. Again, didn't go crazy. But I think going that extra step to say, like, okay, there's a lot of information here. How is the recipient of this going to be able to ingest it and take something away from it, and put those, I'll call it in sound bites, on a piece of paper for then my manager to be able to say, like, okay, this is the takeaway. I think sort of got the ball rolling that I could do more than just the day to day. But doing that extra legwork and saying, like, yes, this process stinks. Like, nobody should have to copy and paste thousands of line items from Excel into another program and then put it back into Excel. But doing it with a smile on my face most of the time, and then going above and beyond to then summarize the information, which was not part of the ask, definitely laid the foundation that, I was sort of in it to win it a little bit, right? And I always talk about this scenario to the mentors and mentees that I work with at the firm or even outside the firm. I feel like it's sort of starting with like Econ 101, right? You can't take Econ 203 until you get the foundation. People are not going to give you the most glamorous things to work on when you're a first year at the company. They sort of need to build the trust that they have in you, and you also need to build the trust in them to then be able to, move forward and get the bigger and better projects. But to think that you're going to get the biggest thing since sliced bread on day 2, like, reality check, guys. Like, think about it. You wouldn't want to put that, that person in that situation right from the get-go.
But I would say on the topic, definitely agree with everything Lisa mentioned, is be a professional. And what does that mean? Is one saying I used to hear all the time: early is on time is late is unacceptable. Like, be punctual, work hard. I'll never forget. So stories like when I first graduated, I was at home with my parents, and so basically my dad would go to work in the morning and he would drop me to the train station to get to work. And I would get to the office at like 7:30 a.m. I'm just like, why am I here right now? I got here before the MD and all the senior people, but people notice the little things of punctuality and work ethic. And even if you don't know something, I think people are more willing to invest their time in you to your growth because they see that desire. So be punctual, work hard. Perception is a lot of times with newer generations that, younger generations don't want to work hard. All those LinkedIn articles dispel those notions, right? Like, put in the work and show up on time.
I think in a similar vein that Lisa was speaking about, ownership and proactivity is really important. And I think that gets a lot of recognition from senior executives. Like the example she gave, if when you get an assignment, consider it your own until it's over. So if somebody asks you to do an assignment, like, hey, can you do this research audit on this topic? Okay, I did it. Here you go. Ask, what's next? What can I do next? Can I help you? Do you want me to synthesize it for you? Do you want some key takeaways? I can tell you these 3 headlines. Do you want me to dig deeper? Do you need some data? Is it going into a presentation? Do you need to get slides started? See it through to the end. In some cases, you'll start to know what the next steps are, and then just say, hey, I'm done with this. Let me know when you've reviewed it. Then I can move on to this step if you'd like me to. And just show that you know the next steps that are coming and that you are in it to own it until it's over, instead of just, here you go, done, and that's the end of the story. You want to show that you're committed to the assignment and that you're thinking forward as a partner, even if you have a more like junior responsibility, you're a partner in this project now and you're with that person until it's seen through to the end.
And then to Lisa's point, go above and beyond. In whatever your craft is, whatever your profession, if you're average, you probably won't get noticed or really stand out. If you're just doing the basics, but when you go above and beyond, you perform at a higher level, or you compete elite, I like to say, that's when people notice you, or they say, oh, who is that? That's Jennifer. Okay, I see what she's doing. If everyone else is here, go there.
Thank you so much to all of our amazing panelists for taking the time to share their expertise. And thank you to all of you who tuned in tonight. I'd like to share that our next Gold event will be Gold Trivia Night on December 15th. It will be virtual, so please be on the lookout for an email about the event in the next couple of days.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for
Thank you
everyone.
guys. Good
Bye.
luck.
Take
You
care.
guys.
Names.